The next shop that day was Galactic Quest in Buford, but before getting into that shop, let's look at Galactic Quest in Lawrenceville, which I went to before I started this trip. Guys, I really like Galactic Quest. They are both solid, updated shops that focus a lot on indie comics, local creators, the comic scene, and local artists. And according to them, they host the largest free comic book day event in the country, based on the 10,000 people that showed up last year across the two shops. Now, it helps that Free Comic Book Day has become a city event in Lawrenceville, and the entire town square basically becomes a mini comic convention that benefits all the shops in the area. So even though it's probably a stretch to say that more than 10,000 people were in the shop that day, Galactic Quest is the entity that started this yearly mini convention that stimulates the local economy, and they gave away a literal ton of free comic books this year, and that's pretty cool. But anyway, the shop itself is impressive on its own. The selection of new issues is fantastic, with pretty much every new issue from Marvel and DC, and plenty of indie titles, both popular and more niche. It was a Galactic Quest manager who convinced me to read EC's new titles, and they've been amazing. Their wall of trade paperbacks is thorough, to say the least. They also have signs everywhere reminding you to just ask them for a special order if you want something they don't have. I love that they display these Silver and Bronze Age books on this rack, because even though a few of them can be pricier, around the $50 mark, there are plenty of eye-catching covers around $5. I probably bought a couple issues just because they looked so good on that shelf when I may have just browsed right past them if they were in a box. Case in point, I was so amused by this cover that I ended up buying the issue. Check out this cool 3D Mighty Mouse comic. Some of these X-Men comics were a little overpriced though. Quite a few of these I found in dollar bins before I gave them away earlier this year. Not only do they have a section dedicated to EC Comics, but they also have a bunch of artist books and the largest selection of these PS art books that I've seen at any shop. I love these things because they do a great job of preserving the original colors and have a textured grain to the paper instead of the typical glossy stuff that new issues have. They also had quite a few 50-cent bins with relatively decent selection. It's not sorted, but I'd be very surprised if any shop sorted their 50-cent bins. Their manga section was crazy, probably one of the shop's strengths. It's shelf after shelf of well-curated manga. They said it's the largest selection of manga in Gwinnett County, which seems believable. There was a whole separate room for back issues and board games, and all the back issues were half off. I didn't get any footage of the back issues here, but they're pretty consistent with the back issues at the Buford location, which I'll show you next. At the front of the shop, there's an excellent kids section with a great selection of books like Owly, which I don't see in shops enough. Behind the counter were some excellent key issues, like the first appearance of Poison Ivy, this issue of Ken Shannon, this early appearance of Two-Face, this gorgeous Spider-Man issue, these great keys all in a row, and this super cool issue of Picture News. I always love to see these vintage Star Wars action figures at shops, but these were way more expensive than usual, because it turns out that they're prototypes which were made for toy shows. They're a 1983 series, I think, and they even had the C-3PO carrying case. I know I've been talking about this shop for way too long already, so I'll hurry up and show you their gaming basement, which is very well decorated. They use this space for game nights, D&D, Gundam building, art classes, and just general hangout space. I love Galactic Quest. So I'll give the Lawrenceville location 5 resounding points in community involvement, and I normally don't give 5 issues and new issues unless there are staff recommendations and quick synopses posted under some issues, but given their in-person endorsements of so many new issues, I think I'll give them 5 points. I'm also on the fence about back issues because there's a pretty good selection and they are half off all the time, but really half off those prices just brings them down to regular prices. But if we were to compare them directly to Bizarro Wuxtree, I'd say that they earned the same score, so I'll give them 5 points for back issues. An easy 5 points in Oh Wow Factor, a strong 4 points in bargain section, and 5 strong points in organization. That leaves Lawrenceville Galactic Quest with what I consider to be the highest possible score a shop that is shackled by the confines of capitalism can achieve, 29 out of 30 points. Which brings us to the Buford location, where I met with the owner Kyle, who had all kinds of amazing things to show me. This space felt a little bigger than the Lawrenceville location, but the layout was pretty much the same. They had their racks of new issues separated into Marvel, DC, and Indie. They had rows and rows of back issues for half off, which I spent as much time as I could spare digging through. They had their rack of cool, affordable covers, which I can't help but browse every time I go. Their kids section was on point, just like the other location. They had the same 50-cent bins, the same wall of graphic novels, an art book section, walls absolutely covered in artwork done by local artists. Did I mention that Galactic Quest has a mascot? And a whole separate room for gaming. Behind the counter were more awesome keys, like these pretty common ones, and this really really cool Atom Age cover, but also a few issues that Kyle pulled out specifically for the video. I'll leave lots of time to pan over these because every single one of these is amazing. This is the only time I've ever seen the famous Crime Suspense Stories issue in person, and this issue of Superman is from 1939. What an amazing cover. They also had a very early printing, if not first printing, of Seduction of the Innocent, which I would very much like to read, and this comic called The Adventures of Mr. Oldbuck. This was the first comic ever printed in America, first in a newspaper in 1842, and then in this book form in 1849. So this comic is older than the Civil War. This volume in particular, I think, might be a British printing from 1841, but I might be wrong. Either way, it's probably the single most impressive comic I've ever seen in my life. Maximum bananas! The owner, Kyle, is the creator of Hero Cats of Stellar City, which is very cute and also a coincidence because the first comic characters I ever created and wrote about were Super Cats, way back in early elementary school. Probably a pretty common idea for anybody who likes comic books and cats, now that I think about it. But still neat! The vibe I get from Kyle is that we're like-minded in the appreciation we have for comic culture, comic shops, the history of graphic storytelling, and the promotion of children's literacy. Like I said, I love Galactic Quest. It's great. So for the Buford location, it's practically the same shop, so we'll say 5 points in community involvement, 5 points in new issues, 5 points in back issues, 5 points in oh wow factor, 4 points in bargain section, and 5 points in organization. They're worth a visit.